Dahil sa'yo.
I just wanted to part a little bit from what Luna was saying. Actually, it's not just Luna, but when we talk about Filipino American history here in America, invariably the focus is on the Manong generation, our parents' generation. And I kind of beg to differ because our generation went through the same things. Think about it. We also did not have laws that protected us. We didn't have civil rights. We didn't have affirmative action. We didn't have protections in housing. We didn't have a lot of that. We also went through things that the Manongs didn't go through, such as when I was in high school, despite the fact that I had good grades, my counselor, when I put down that I wanted to go to college, and he told me, he says that your kind belong in agriculture or shop. That's what I was supposed to do. And Luna said earlier, maybe that was last night, that we couldn't go to proms. There were a lot of those kind of things that we encountered as kids that our parents never did because they didn't come here as kids. And I think it's very important, if you think about it, that we went through the same pains, if not worse pains, because we were younger. And it affected us when we became adults. Luna talked a little bit about when she became an adult. She found out all these things and she became bitter. I was bitter earlier. When I was in grade school, on the playground, somebody said, I want to see your tail. I want to see your tail because Filipinos have tails. I was just a kid. So that's the kind of thing that pisses me off sometimes when no one looks at the experiences that we went through. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons that why I wrote 2 books, because our generation went through a lot of the same things that our parents did. We couldn't get jobs either. We couldn't go to colleges. We couldn't do a lot of things. Anyway, I'll stop.
Well, and the thing is, my friends, they would always say, oh, are you Mexican? Are you Chinese? I mean, they would never say Filipino when I was growing up because they didn't know what Filipino was. And then they would say things like, oh, Filipino, like flippin' Filipino. They'd make fun of our names. Of course, my name was Luna, so I went through school being Looney Tunes or Luna Tuna, whatever. But I mean, we faced a lot of, there were a lot of bullies, which even if you're not Filipino, there's bullies out there. There's bullies today. Leaders of our countries are bullies. But going back to, the feistiness that I think our experience growing up, brown, definitely contributed to my feistiness. I know some of my friends, they call me willful. I have been very willful because of the fact that I was one of 2 daughters with my parents, and I saw my older sister who passed away in 1998, but she was like a Cinderella on the camp, and but yet she was my rock. I followed her around. I did what she told me to do, but she was a very it was almost like she was invisible sometimes, and I'd see her crying, and she was like she was like Cinderella. And I never wanted to be Cinderella, so I rebelled against that. And even my brothers, I remember those are the days when shirts were ironed with starch, and I mean, those are days when we actually ironed. And
I had to look good.
Yeah, these guys were
Not
like,
me. That was her.
these guys. He was a clothes horse, and I remember, I have to go dance. Get that shirt down. I thought, God, how mean. And and I remember my sister would be. We lived in the camp, right? And she cleaned that house. I mean, she mopped the floor. She was doing everything. We had a main house which was just for family use. And then, of course, the men had their bunkhouse and whatever. These guys would come in from the field, not even being considerate, stomp through the house with their stupid, muddy boots. And I used to think, men are so gross. They are. They are really gross. I saw the men in the pool hall with the spit cans and, laying ututs. Well, utut, you know what utut is, right?
Passing gas.
Yes, passing gas. I mean, it was a macho society, and women, so what? Too bad. They were in the majority. But I used to say, oh my God, they're just so gross. Oh my God. So, and growing up with these brothers, same thing. And my 2 younger brothers were just as bad. And of course, these guys, they were gone and they were raising their families already. But in fact, talking about family, let's get back to that thing we were talking about earlier about Jamero dynasty, I guess, because if we talk about the numbers of our family, we're approaching 5th generation now. These guys are both great-grandparents. They also are the biggest contributors to the numbers that make up the Jameros today. So, Pete, you want to tell us how many children and how many grandchildren and how many
Legal or
great-grand...
not?
Oh, just be legal.
Oh,
Gosh.
well,
You're so annoying.
actually, I have 6 children, so does Herb, which is kind of interesting. But we're opposite in the sense that I have 5 girls, 1 boy. He has the opposite. He has 1 girl and 5 boys. I don't know how that happened. And they're about the same age, you can imagine. But I guess I want to go back to another thing that kind of riles me sometimes. When I was an adult, I experienced housing discrimination 2-3 times. Even when my kids were small. And I don't know if you can even imagine how it is when you look for a place to rent and a nice little old lady says, oh, I'm so sorry, the house was just rented. So I get on the phone and call again. Is the house still available? And of course I have good English. She doesn't know who's on the other side. She says, oh yeah, why don't you come on over? And I say, you lying son of a bitch. Anyway, that's very painful because here you are like any other father trying to do as best as you can for your family of little guys. Hurtful. So it happened as an adult also, these kind of things. So
Yeah, these guys
I
were...
I'm not
think
going to be
that,
feisty anymore.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, and
when you were in college.
I went to college before him because he was in the service, and I was too young, and I experienced that same kind of situation in my first week there in San Jose State, looking for a place to stay. Fortunately, I roomed with a World War II veteran who actually was sort of my tutor at the time and kind of guided me through all of this. And so anyway, I had that similar experience that Peter had, almost exactly the same. And if it wasn't for this veteran who had already gone through this and explaining this to me, I don't know how I would have gone through this. But also when Peter got discharged 2 years later, and I was married, just got married, we all decided to room together. So we got this house, and 1 week later, we were told we were evicted because the neighbors didn't want us around. And I think that I still remember having to tell my wife that we couldn't live there anymore. The tears that came to my eyes, and then having to go home and tell these guys that we had to find another place. And one of the things that I remember was that he had the kind of skills to put this down wrote the experience in the San Jose State Daily, or the
It had
newspaper,
San Jose
student
Mercury.
newspaper,
Yeah.
and the newspaper. And so
Right.
we got pretty good coverage. There was even protests outside our on the street outside the home. But I don't think it really got anywhere
That's
after
right.
all of that.
That's right.
And I was getting ready to be drafted in the military, and so for me, what they did, they had, I think the International Settlement House was starting. It wasn't finished yet, so they let us stay in there for about a month or so until the end of school. So it just happens over and over again. I want to just maybe skip around because fill in one space about the immigration of my father and the times what he had to leave behind. And I think we talk about the economic things, being poor, but we also have to put it in context in the fact that when he was growing up, the Philippine-American War had just started. And by the time he left, the island was pretty well ravaged. I mean, when you look at the policy of the American government at the time, American island of Samar, there was a standing order by the general is, shoot everybody over the age of 12 in terms of going after the Philippine rebellion. And in our hometown, it was being burnt. And one of our relatives said, "The hell with it, I'm staying here." And he got burnt in the ground, with the house. So, these, you can imagine growing up in that kind of situation and being pretty impoverished. So when they were recruited to go to the Philippines, to go to Hawaii, that was a good choice. That was a good choice for them.
But I think there's a pattern in what we're talking about here, as far as struggles, the discrimination, and a lot of it has to do with attitude. Obviously, the mindset, where that frame of reference is coming from, the education or lack of education, and I mean what we're talking about today, the immigration issues that we're facing today, the discrimination issues that we're facing today, the housing issues that we're facing today. It's like harking back to what we experienced back in the 50s and the 60s. And why? Because you have a leadership in this country of today that reflects a mindset that is not in the direction of progress, not for all Americans anyway, only for the few. And I think if I've learned anything as being a Filipino American in this country, is the fact that, if you don't stand up and you don't say, hey, I'm here too, and I want to tell my story, because your story is not complete until you know what my story is and how we together have really made this country the way it is. And that's the kind of message I think that resonates with everybody. I mean, whether you're Filipino, whatever you are, because there's other organizations and other people like us. We happen to be very talkative people, being Jameros. And of course, I had to, being the only woman around, I always had to just jump in whenever I could, because between my brother, you asked me, Ann, why I never wanted to do these things before. Now you know why. Because I had to jump in and force my opinion on these guys, because they were my mentors too. And out of respect, I sometimes would defer to them. Not so much now, because I've paid my dues too, so I still defer to them.
We defer to you now.
Hey, he doesn't defer to me, but he listened to one of my presentations at the Philippine National Museum, and this was the first time I ever heard one of my brothers say, is usually it says, "Oh, are you Pete's sister, or are you Herb's sister?" And then tell him what you said after I gave this brilliant presentation at the Filipino Museum. What did you say?
I must have repressed that.
So you suppressed it. He said, "From now on, I will now be known as Luna's brother."
Oh.
Yes, I thought, whoa! I finally get some kudos, you know. So, but again, our family has had problems just like every other family. It's not as if we haven't had disagreements, conflicts, or whatever. But we've become better people through it all. I mean, and I have to say that being a part of this family, I'm very blessed. There's not a lot of families that with the kind of conflict, with the kind of experiences, the heartaches that we've gone through, that we've been there for each other, and our family has had its share, definitely has had its share. We lost family way too young in our family. We've lost children. Herb's lost grandchildren. Pete's lost grandchildren. We've all had losses. They both lost the losses of wives and brothers and sisters, but the resilience of family is what we're about. And through it all, I think our story, I mean, Anne's always talking about the Jamero dynasty, and I didn't really get it at first. I thought, well, what she keeps on talking about Jamero dynasty, what is it? And so I finally have accepted the fact that, our dynasty is in our story and who we are as a family. And I hope that we've shared, some of who we are. Like I said, I mean, my brother Pete over here, he's going to be 90 this year, and my brother Herb is 86. I'm 76. And so we have, we've gone through a lot. We've seen a lot. We've experienced a lot. And I know we're on that same journey. We all are, but on the other side, some good stuff. A lot of people that will be welcoming us in their embrace. But while we're here, I'm just glad that we do things like this, I mean, and there's simple things that we do. I mean, lately and sadly, a lot of our social time has been going to memorials, going to friends' funerals. In fact, we have another good friend in the family whose funeral is next week. I think I've gone to 4 funerals since the beginning of January of this year. So again, that reflects the fact that, time is not always on our side. We're going to have more memories in our past than we ever will have in our future. But because we have so many memories in our past, it's time to share, And I can get very emotional. My voice is starting to shake now. I'm seeing my son over there in the corner wondering, anytime she's going to break down. But I'm not.
I'm never emotional. But seriously, we all bear scars. And we do have a dynasty. Our family, starting from our parents' beginnings here in America, we now are upwards of 100 Jameros. And it's considering the span and the diversity that we now have in the family, it's really a together family. But I just wanted to say that, scars can also make you stronger. And in reflecting on my life, all the hurts I've had, all the scars that I bear, have really made me stronger. It's made me have faith in basic things like family. It made me stronger as an individual. It made me realize that I'm as good as anybody else. And if I've had some success in my career and in my life, I think scars have had a lot to do with that, if you think about it that way. And it's a mindset too. I've really learned that you can look at things like a glass of water as half empty, or half full. And for some reason, I've really been an optimistic guy in my life. And I think it's because I've gone through some hurts and disappointments. And these are things that I think young people really need to understand. I think young people today have not gone through the personal hurts that we've talked about here. And in some ways, I think they should. I think young men ought to go in the armed services, for example. And I think women ought to go out in the work world earlier. But that's just me. Instead of coddling our young people today and giving them things to play with so that they never become adults, they just become older kids. Anyway, I'm pontificating again. I'll stop.
Do you want to have some closing remarks, Herb?
Yeah, I guess maybe like piggybacking on some of the things that you were saying. I think we learned how to survive, I think is a good word for it, because we really had no choice but to survive. We had to, while we were fighting with each other, we had to play with each other. You know, while we were disagreeing with each other, we had to do things together. So it wasn't just going and then leaving it alone. There had to be some kind of resolution, if you will. You know, I could chase him with a knife one time, but I did. I never caught up with him, you know. But then a couple hours later, we were doing something, some silly thing out there. And I think this is what kind of helped us in terms of maybe who we are, because we could take it to the next step instead of just leaving it there and then scratching your head later what happened. And I think this is the kind of maybe bonding that we had that, you know, you don't realize it's there until much later. And then I think in terms of an everlasting value, which helped us throughout all our lives, is my mother's push for education. You got to go to school, go to school, go to school. I don't think she knew and understood that of going to college, but at least going to high school. So education was a very important thing. So by the time we got through it sort of made sense that maybe we'd all go to college. When you look at it, 6 of us has at least a BA, right? And the other 2 began junior college. You know, 6 of us has BA. My brother and I have our masters. You know, all of this kind of thing. So you know, we have to credit to the fact that this was a value that I think we all accepted, and how we kind of got on with our own lives, but yet didn't forget the other things of growing up. And I think, unfortunately, this generation doesn't quite have that. And I think this is why we like to tell stories. And this is why we like to tell stories about our reunions. You know, we have a reunion, I have scratched my head. Why are we having a reunion when every Christmas, every Easter, we're all getting together, but we still have a reunion? So we try to replicate those kinds of things in our get-togethers.
And you know, because we do get together as often as we do, you know, that keeps the family legacy going, because we're reminded every time we get together how we all started, you know. And so, you know, we get together. Oh, there's always birthdays, but you know, the main holidays. And I think of some of my friends that they don't even see brothers and sisters for like years, 5 years, 10 years, you know, and they've not been able to forgive whatever feud they might have had, and what we could have lost if we were the same way, you know, in our own family. And it's easy to get that way because you have a disagreement, you just say, oh, I don't want to talk to them anymore. I mean, I can't stand them, whatever, you know. But family is family, and there's there's a lot of forgiveness in our hearts, and family keeps on, regardless of whether you're on the same side sometimes, but you are on the same side because you're family. But we may not always agree. I want to especially thank Anne Fahelan over here for opening up to our stories and encouraging us to tell them.